My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sangran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnani. I'm going to continue today with the essence of the Katha Upanisha. And I just want to recap what we have done, because we have done part 1 and part 2. Part 1, chapter 1, part 1, chapter 2. So I want to run through with you what we covered. So part 1, chapter 1 is actually about the characters and the values that this Upanishad is trying to highlight, and particularly the character of Vajasravas and Nachiketa, and two contrasting values that they share. One is very ritualistic, another one is more introspective and contemplative, and the search for truth. We also saw the values that is discussed by Lord Yama. And basically, chapter 1, which is part 1, is about values for acquiring the truth. And the kind of values that is needed to uncover the secret of life, and the secret of the universe, and the secret of God itself. So here we covered, and in this chapter, we saw this little boy called Nachiketa having that values that helped him to lead to Lord Yama and pose those questions about death and what happens after death. So Lord Yama, as we said, tries to distract him, and he was unable to distract him from the truth. So then we move to part 1, chapter 2. It discusses the frame of mind to acquire the truth. What happens, what happens, in death and so on. What's life and death? So here, Lord Yama explains to him the kind of frame of mind that one needs, and what frame of mind that prevents people from acquiring the truth, and the frame of mind that helps people to uncover the truth. And he also talks about the kind of different types of knowledge that shape the frame of the mind, sprayas and the shreyas. The knowledge of that fleeting, temporary desirousness, and the knowledge of eternal and everlasting. So he talks about that types of knowledge that helps shape the frame of our mind. If the mind is continuously, gravitating towards materiality, it would not discover that eternal truth. If the mind is, uncovers that essential transcendental nature, the mind attains that, that abode of, universal peace sanctuary, or the abode of that divinity. And to do that, that knowledge actually teaches the mind to anchor on the universal vibration, right? And the universal vibration is about that Om, awareness, unification, and moksha. And he says that one can acquire this knowledge from enlightened teachers. And he talks about the qualities of the teachers that are able to impart this knowledge. And in that self-realized teachers are able to give you the description of the self in the most simplest and the most easiest way of, experiencing that self. So in this chapter, we covered these aspects. So we move on to part 1, chapter 3 today. In this chapter, Lord Yama explains about two important components that has an impact on our actions, experiences, and so on. So here he talks about the individual and the cosmic self, right? So here he says that in this book, Lord Yama tells that all of us possess that individual self that gives us that material personality and identity. And we also have that cosmic self that gives us that universal and transcendental nature of who we are. He says the two enjoy the fruits of actions. And he says, this knowledge resides in the cave of the intellect. So to uncover this, one needs to use one's buddhi. One needs to, harness their knowledge and intellect, right? And really pushing their intellect to that brings of an explorer that is charting new frontiers. Of course, we learn many things about the material world, and we spend very little time of knowing ourselves. So one needs to introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate on this. And he says this abode, the cave of intellect, is where the best place of that self-realization. If one is able to harness this cave of intellect, Mahan talks about Arivin Arival, that knowledge, the intellect, with experience and wisdom, right? And here he explains that is the best place for self-realization, because the self can only be uncovered by this mind or a inspired mind, or that mind that is inspired by that intellect. So that gives clarity of who we are, what we are, and so on. So it requires a fair bit of self-exploration, self-discovery, self-development, and ultimately leads to that self-realization. So he talks about defining that individual self and cosmic self. In the context of Mahan, this is the small I and the big I. So here he goes on to explain, those who know Brahman say that the individual self and the cosmic self are related to each other like light and shadow, right, or shade. You see, all of us have a physical form. But when the light hits our physical form, we have a shadow. So you can't separate out that body that emanates that light and the shadow that falls on the background. When the body moves, the shadow too moves. So again, here he's giving a very, detailed, precise explanation of the individual self, the small I, and the big I, the cosmic self, right? You see that if you touch the shade, you can't touch the shade, yet it is there, right? And there seemed to be a kind of a duality that, one cannot exist without the other. So here he goes on to explain that how they are interrelated. So he says that for those who, as householders, worship the five fires and have thrice performed the Nachiketa fire, also say the same. They say that the cosmic and the individual self are the same. It manifests, the cosmic self manifests as that individual personality self, right? And to discover that, one needs to undertake a few key things. So he says that a householder worships this cosmic self, because we can call that the big I, manifests in many forms, yet it is not affected by anything. Right? So you can see the shadow has that form, right? If the shadow puts on a bigger clothes, it'll look bigger, right? But if you touch the shadow, you cannot touch the shadow, right? So again, he says that both are omnipresent. Right? You can't have the shadow without the form, and you can't have the form without the shadow. Right? So here it is. He explains that how that the householder, to discover this, both the individual self and the cosmic self, one needs to practice that five fires. and I'll explain what that is, and have thrice performed the Nachiketa sacrifice. Now he's alluding to that meditational practice. What is the five fire? He says that householder worships, ordinary householder worships what we call the, the heavens, the all the different celestial heavens. People pray to that. That also is a manifestation of that divinity, though the manifestation is in the mind. Right? He says the householder worships the five fire. The first one is heavens. The second one is cloud and rain, because without cloud and rain, you see that life becomes impossible, right? So when there is drought, people pray for rain, right? Without rain, things won't grow. So a householder that has got duties in this material world will worship for a better life, better karma, and all those things. And also for ensuring the sustainability of their life, providing water, food, nourishment. The third aspect of the five fires is earth. Earth is really important. That's why you see that, people pray, they value, they respect the earth, Mother Nature. And the fourth fire is, of course, men, in this context, human beings, and women who have the ability to have offspring and have that, what we call in Tamil, Parinama Valachi, the growth of that human species. So he says, a householder worships these five fires. Why does he call fires? Because the heavens, the celestials, emanate from this cosmic self in the form of the primordial atom. And, if you, from a scientific perspective, you can call it the primordial fire, right? The crucible of the fire that led to everything else, matter, energy, form, right? The same thing with, cloud and rain, also fire, without atoms and molecules and electrons, you would not have those basic building blocks of our universe on the periodic table that gives us everything in this universe, including water, and of course, earth, and more complex beings such as men and women who are critical for the development of the human species. So here he says that, yes, in all, biological and, beings, you have both the individual and the cosmic self, including in the human form. So he speaks about these five fires where everything that we have spoken about, everything in this universe is a manifestation of those, divine substratum, which, has the elements of the fire, which is actually, you'll see later on the vibration that I'll talk about. So he says, have thrice performed the Nachiketa sacrifice. The Nachiketa sacrifice is actually the meditational intensity, right? So what he's saying here is that to understand the individual self and the cosmic self, one needs to understand the five fires of life, which is actually the celestial, things in the our universe, our stars and the suns and the galaxies, that which nourishes all of us, which is, water. Without water, life does not exist. If you see a lot of the other planets and other, places, there's no water, so there's no life. Earth is very important because it has all the nutrients to give life. So men and women, that it's critical for the species. So he speaks about this, right? Then he goes on to say that this have thrice performed the Nachiketa sacrifice. So he says now, understanding these five elements are very important, but also understanding the divinity of those five elements are very important. That the cosmic self is a manifestation of all this, substratum. And he says a householder worships these five elements, and this is where you see that Nachiketa's father was doing that sacrifice, the fire sacrifice. And in this, he says that have thrice performed the Nachiketa sacrifice, also the same thing. He says that those who practice these five fires and have performed this three, or in three states, have also said that there is a individual self and a cosmic self. Even our Mahan speaks about the small I and the big I. So, what is that thrice means? It means the threefold aspects of our lives, right? It's actually our rituals or the acharas that is performed three times, three different aspects of our rituals that we perform. The first one is the first ritual is actually about knowledge and jnana, the acquisition of knowledge, introspection, contemplation, reflection, right? He says that this is critical of acquiring knowledge. So one who don't seek this knowledge intensively will not discover this Brahman in the form of that cosmic self, nor as the individual self, right? So he says three states of this performance, the practice is very important. One is the acquisition of knowledge, continuously contemplating what is, who am I, what am I, what is this limited I and what is this, unlimited I or the cosmic I, continuously reflecting back. That can only come through a intensity of knowledge acquisition. The second aspect is sacrifice, being, taking the time to do those key practices. Allocating time to acquire knowledge, one needs to allocate time for introspection. One needs to allocate time for contemplation. One needs to allocate time for meditation. One needs to allocate time for service, right? In all these dimensions, you see that, that knowledge, the search for the truth and the divinity is critical. And of course, the last one is doing our duty as a species, coming from this Homo sapien human race. We have certain duties, to ensure we were created, we are sustained, and we will dissolve in Mother Nature. So it is in the best interest for us to acquire the knowledge, not overly indulge in things, ensure that the health of the planet and nature is looked after. Look after our body, don't abuse our body with all kinds of intoxicants. Make sure we live a healthy life. Nature's blessed us with this body. Nature's given us a wonderful mind and intellect. Make sure we use that and not contaminate it. That's also sacrifice. And ultimately, we have a duty to be able to share all the resources that nature has blessed us with, right? Starting with our intellect, peace of mind, other resources to help others, right? So here it's this to be able to discover this truth of the self, one needs to practice the Nachiketa fire. That means understanding the five realms of existence, and then certain practices you have to put in place, acquisition of knowledge, sacrifice. Yes, whenever you do something, you're giving up something. Whenever you take to the path of spirituality, you have to give up some aspects of your materiality. Whenever you take time to start your meditation early in the morning at 4:30 to 5:30, you have to give that 1 hour away from your sleep. So everything requires sacrifice. And once you acquire the knowledge, you are duty bound to undertake your roles in life in the best possible way, including, as looking after yourself, sustaining your family, looking after the well-being of your family, your community you live in, the countries that you live in, and also as a species of not harming nature. So we are duty bound. That itself is a spiritual pursuit, right? So again, here they wonderfully say how to divinize every aspect of our lives. to be able to see the divinity, the cosmic self imprinted in every facet of our lives. And the other aspect, when we say thrice perform, is united with three important things: mother, father, that which gave birth to our body, having full respect for them, looking after them. And that's what we as a species have evolved, because we looked after each other, not only our parents and our teachers that pass on this message, but also our neighbors and as a community. So here, this passage is so kind of has so much intensity, talks about what one needs to do to be able to separate, to understand the self, both the cosmic and that individual self, right? So understanding the nature of the universe, performing certain actions, right, that unify everything so that we attain the liberation. So here, the Lord Yama teaches Nachiketa, these are the things that one needs to do to really understand who oneself. So in essence, what we see here is that the 5 fires of meditation that a householder performs in their daily duty, which is sacrifices. So this is really important, right? So in the five, as realms of our lives, we we treat it all as part of that cosmic divinity. So divinizing every aspect of our lives, and doing that, understanding and taking, partaking in the duties, the sacrifice, without, disconnecting yourself from the spiritual essence, that Brahman in us, right? And to know that that Brahman that is in us, that enable us to attain consciousness and do everything else, is also part and parcel of everything around us, from the heavens right up to the earth and other species, right? So see divinity in everything, you see. And if we see divinity in everything, we will also see divinity in the cycle of life, that what we call birth and death is not really birth and death. Actually, it's a continuous transformation that is taking place. Birth, sustaining, death. In death, you dissolve, a new life emerges. So there's a continuous flow that the understanding of birth and death completely is transformed. There is no such thing as birth that we call and death. It is a continuous, confluence of, flow of, particles and energy and everything else, that is continuously evolving. So the cycle of birth and death completely gives you a different reality. So that requires us to have full understanding of everything in this universe, the emergence of the universe, everything that is imprinted with that transcendental nature of the cosmic self. And if our mind is anchored on that, and if the mind is anchored in every facet of our daily life, we'll be able to experience that cosmic self, even in the small, minutest part of our life, even the small, minutest thing in existence, you'll be able to see that cosmic self. So this is what Lord Yama is explaining to Nachiketa, that, householder, as long as they worship that 5 fires, having good understanding of every stratum of this life, and practicing this 3 times in 3 stations of our lives, right? And you see that, they too say that while we have that individual self and the cosmic self, they are all interrelated. So what we do in our material world, if we do it with so much divinity and anchor the divinity, we will not be decoupled from the divinity. If we do it, in a disjointed way, at times we don't feel that cosmic self. The moment you experience the cosmic self, you see that you become transcendental to birth and death. So that's what Lord Yama is explaining to Nachiketa. So then he goes on to the second part, which is that he says that so the part is the understanding about everything of existence, the five elements, divinity, understanding the three states, of existence. But he says that to cross that, to those who wish to cross over the ocean of worldly experience through sacrifices, he says that it is hard for human beings to break away from that material gravity. They get pulled. I got this duty la, I got that one la, this and that. Right? It's a lot of excuses. He says the only way to do this is that the Nachiketa fire stands as a fine bridge. So you're crossing from one to the other, from the materiality to the spiritual realm. It's a thin hair-like bridge. And bottom there, you see that the lake, you have a lot of fire. Fire is desires. So he says that when the desire is so intensive, the thin, bridge like a hair gets burnt out. So you can't make that cross from the material gravity, break away from the material gravity to the spiritual enlightenment. He says that the only way to do that is through this Nachiketa fire, having good understanding and practicing that introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. So he says, we know of this fire. So that means this, in our language, you call tavakanal, that intensive tapas, right? We can also perform it. He says, this Nachiketa fire is that deep meditational practice that helps us to neutralize that material gravity. You see? So if you perform this really well, he says that, and we also know of the way that takes you to the other shore. That means that Brahman with attributes to the Parabrahman, which is Brahman without attributes. That means the Brahman, that human personality that experiences everything, sometimes get impacted by things, have that 18 asuric qualities. He says the only way to overcome that hinders us from realizing that self is through this intensive introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. This is the Nachiketa fire. So in the earlier chapter, he says that only an experienced guru that have attained that will be able to show you that path. So he says, we know of this fire and we all can also perform it. So all of us can perform it, right? But we all have an opportunity to walk that bridge from that, that Brahman with attributes to the Brahman without attributes, to the Parabrahman. And you attain fearlessness. You become very brave. You become very creative, right? He says to attain that, one needs to allocate time for introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation, no matter what the circumstances are, whether the body is ailing or whether you feel, not so good, things are not so great, or there is traffic jam. The biggest traffic jam is in people's mind. When the moment you can't break the traffic jam, everything that you see becomes a traffic jam. So he says this, to break this away, one needs to practice that, what he called the Nachiketa fire, that's given in Boon 2. So what I want to talk about, today I wanted to summarize the kind of practices that are needed to bridge this, go across this bridge, you see. So he says you don't have to go roundabout in liberation, searching for liberation. Liberation is very simple. He says that, people go round and round doing this. He says the only way to acquire the spiritual knowledge is an inward journey through this Nachiketa fire, which is actually our practice of meditation, right? So again, to attain this, one needs to allocate time for oneself. If you want to attain self-realization, you have to allocate time for the self, right? If you want to attain the Parabrahman, one needs to allocate time for that meditation, that ICRM, which I talked about. So this is what I want to cover today. In the next class, I will cover that how the relationship between the soul, the body, the mind, the intellect, and I'll introduce this notion of the chariot. Okay, a very nice, beautiful picture that explains the relationship between the small I and the big I. Between the what I say the individual self and the cosmic self. There's a beautiful dynamics between that, and I'll introduce this wonderful chariot that in the next class I'll take you through what that chariot actually signify. Okay, I will stop here. I will see you all next week with a little bit more, uh, you know, deeper, probing deeper into that cosmic self and the individual self, and how does one transition from the individual self to the cosmic self, and while experiencing the individual self, you have a cosmic mindset. With that, Sandosha.